There it comes. There it comes. There it comes now.
Here we are. How are you?
I'm good here in Milan, where things are all right, I guess.
Yeah. What's the status there at the moment?
It keeps changing. Now it's all right, but then it's going to be tighter on Sunday, and then who knows? Like, it changes all the time.
Yeah. We had a similar situation here over Christmas. It was we were in and then we were out, and then we were doing things and then we weren't doing things. Right now, I don't know anymore. I've lost track.
Kind of like, if you go out and the shops are closed, I guess they're closed. They're open. Bars, like, you get like bars and restaurants are open until 6 o'clock, but that's about it.
Oh, you can still. Oh, you've still got bars and restaurants. You lucky man.
For now. So maybe on Sunday that won't be the case anymore.
We haven't had those glorious things since October time. We had a little period in December where we were allowed to go with like a family member, but that was it, and it was like 2 weeks or something. So yeah, we've lost most of the good stuff, but we're still fighting. Yeah. We're still living lives through our laptops and making the most of it.
Totally.
And having conversations with the glorious likes of yourself, yeah?
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, dude, like, first and foremost, I'll welcome you to what should be a film festival, but is actually just a bunch of people sitting in front of laptops all day long.
I guess that's what we're all doing, so.
So I'll welcome you to this year's Short Sounds Film Festival. We're normally in a glorious cinema on the south coast of the UK, but we're not. We're doing things slightly differently this year. But hey ho, we get on and make the most of it. But let's get to the crux of it. Congratulations on what is a glorious film.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, I was very fortunate enough to watch it last night, courtesy of Bulldog Film Distribution here in the UK. We've had a good relationship with those guys for a few years. They distributed one of our films. Really nice guys, and I believe we heard about the film through them, and then we asked, what's the situation in terms of like premiering or wherever it's available, and they said, well, if you wanted a premiere at the film festival, we'd be more than we'd love to do that. And so we're delighted to be able to say that this is going to be one of the first places that you can watch Witch. Is that right?
Definitely. I mean, we definitely had a festival run, but it's definitely one of the first times in the UK for sure. So I'm really happy to, also because we have such a fan base in the UK, so to be able to show it through you in people's homes that they can finally see it themselves.
Amazing. It's an absolute pleasure to be considered the UK festival premiere for this film. I'm an absolute rock and roller, so I was in love with it from the word go. I racked up a few questions for you, but yeah, let's see where we go with it. I want to start, Gio, with like, you're in the film, aren't you? You're featured in the film, and you do say a little bit about how you came to be involved with Witch and Jaggery at the very beginning. But I'd like to know, like, how on earth did you end up in Zambia in the first place? Like, what's your background, and like, what led you there? And did you know about Witch and Jaggery before you turned up there?
Okay, so I guess let's start from the first time I heard Witch, which was, I think, in 2012, where I listen to a lot of music, like yourself, as you were saying, and I collect records. And in 2012 is when the Witch albums were reissued by Now Again Records. And just out of the blue, a friend of mine sent me a song called Strange Dream by Witch. And they're like, I think you're going to dig this. And it blew me away. And I was like, incredible, I really didn't know anything about like African rock and roll. I didn't really know that they did it in that style there. I didn't know where Zambia was, didn't know anything. And so like I kind of researched it, but it kind of like stayed in the back of my mind, and like I never thought that I'd be able to do anything like what I managed to do. But what happened in the years is I started my own music blog where I started doing first writing about music, then I started doing mixtapes, and then I started doing video sessions of bands that came through to Milan. This was in 2014. And I was doing that and I didn't have a camera. So I was like, well, I could buy like a crappy digital camera for like 200 euros or a top of the line VHS for 30 euros. So I obviously went with the VHS, and I kind of like taught myself how to edit, how to shoot and everything. And I started doing these videos. And that was a lot of fun. I mean, this was a time before VHS was sort of a trendy thing. There was no like VHS apps.
Dude, you could have totally fooled me that VHS camera was born out of sheer necessity as opposed to a stylistic choice. Because I made a note about the different formats that the film is shot on, and I was going to ask you if you did that on purpose, you know, to kind of reflect the fact that the music has survived through the different ages and eras. But the fact that that was just purely because it was the only thing you could get your hands on is brilliant.
Yeah, because I started doing that, and like when the bands I was shooting with at the time in 2014, they were like, you know, this is not vintage, it's just old, you know, like because it wasn't like something yet. You know, now you've got it on your phone, you can do VHS apps and whatever. But at the time, it was just like out of necessity, and I kind of like having a different look for it, you know, because nobody was doing it at the time, so it kind of gave a different.
Yeah, dude, I think you need to reverse that story. I think you need to stop saying. I think you need to pretend that you chose to do it for artistic reasons, because every film school kid in the UK would die to shoot their film on VHS and lay claim to that stylistically. So I think you need to say, no, that was always the plan.
It was, in a way, it was a stylistic sort of thing. I mean, I'm into analog stuff, like listening to records, mainly records rather than like on digital, right? And like I was like, okay, I could buy even like a Super 8, but then a Super 8 doesn't have sound. It's super expensive to develop and all of that. So it's like, well, let's do VHS, because I mean, being a child, being somebody that was born in the 80s, like I lived with VHS, like I'm supposing yourself as well, you know, so I kind of like that, those glitches and like those weird colors and stuff. So it definitely was an artistic choice, but also came out of necessity in a way.
Sure.
So basically, I was doing these videos, and then one day, these friends of mine, these Italian friends, they were like, well, we're doing this marketing trip to market these trucks across Africa. Would you like to come along with us, take a few photographs, help us drive some of the way, all expenses paid? I was like, yeah, obviously. Like, that wasn't like such a difficult choice to make. But then when I found out we were going through Zambia, I was like, well, it would be really cool to like go and shoot a session with Jaggery with Witch. And then like while I was there, I was like, well, it would be even cooler to like ask him a few questions and find out how this music was made, because I was really curious about that. And so the whole thing kind of like kept snowballing. Like I was there, I spent 2 weeks with Jaggery by myself, with a camera, with a microphone, just interviewing him about everything I could. Then I came back, and I was speaking to some friends, and they were like, well, you know, it's really cool, the music, because I was really interested in how the music developed and so on. Like his life story is also really interesting, you know, because not only did he make that style of music for a while, which was unique, but then sort of like had such a varied life afterwards, ending up in mining gemstones. So around the time that I was developing this, I met up with Jaco Gardner, who's also in the film, obviously, who I had shot a session with. And he came up to me, he's like, hey man, so like, I'm getting really into African music, you know, I'd love to go to Africa to sort of play with a musician from the 70s, record something, and then have you come along and film. Where do you think we could go? And I was like, well, Ethiopia's got a really cool scene, and blah, blah. And then I was like, wait a second, kind of doing this in Zambia already, why don't we join forces? And so we did, and he and his drummer, Nick Mauskovic, who now runs the Mauskovic Dance Band, came to Zambia. We did a gig there. And then I came back, and I was like, well, that feels like it's like 2/3 of the film. Like we need to get him to Europe, to tour Europe, and then we'll have the whole thing.
This is a very, very organic process.
Completely, you know? And so like we got him to Europe, and we did the first tour, which was incredible. It was the first time that he toured Europe properly, and we sold out most of the places. People lost their minds. We lost our minds ourselves. You know, it was crazy. And so like that went really well, and that's sort of when the film finishes. But the adventure kept on going, because like after that we toured Europe again, we toured the States, which was even crazier, like selling out LA, San Francisco, Milwaukee, like what? And stuff like that. So yeah, it keeps on going, and it's meant to keep on going. We're looking in a way to go record a new record in Zambia, although like the times are not the easiest to do that at the moment, but we're working on that, and who knows where it will end, I guess.
Oh my God. Wow. What an incredible process. I'm surprised that I have to admit, you explaining the what came after, I'm surprised you decided that this is the point. After this European tour is the cutoff. That's the end of the film.
Yeah, well, that's maybe the end of the first film. Then we can do a sequel or something. But no, because like after that, like I was like, okay, let's start editing, because we had about 200 hours of footage by then to get down to 1.5 hours, which is like 0.75%. So we started editing. It took a year to edit, and like first it was going one way, then I sort of like took every scene, put it on a card, mixed them all together, and found a new sort of arc. And yeah, I mean, I think yeah, it could go on forever, really, as long as it goes. But I think that's definitely a good way to sort of get people that don't know the band to sort of feel the same emotion that we all felt, because it's not only Jaggery, but myself, Jaco, and everybody involved, seeing from something that was just kind of forgotten to becoming something quite successful in a way in front of all these people that, a lot of people like me heard the music, but a lot of people never thought that they would see this band live, and then somehow there it is. And so that's like the thing that I love the most, I guess.
Yeah, it's incredible, those scenes in Amsterdam and Paris, and like, the fact that it's like been resurrected like this phoenix, and he's there, and just people are just acting exactly the same way as they would have done if they'd seen him back in the 70s. Like,
and so he is acting the same way too, actually, because he's completely crazy on stage still, and he's turning 70 this year, so like he's still completely on it.
He doesn't have the soul of a 70-year-old, that's for sure. Okay, that's throwing up a ton more things that I want to explore. First and foremost, so when you're going on this, you've got this crazy, circumstantial event which has brought you to Zambia, and you explain, I'm just going to go and film with Jaggery, and we're going to go and do some interviewing and stuff. Like, was he easy to find? How did you get to that mine where he was based?
Well, okay, him being easy to find relatively, because I found a blog, which is this blog called It's Psychedelic Baby. Maybe you've heard of it. And they did an interview with Jaggery. So I wrote to Clement, the guy that runs it, and he gave me Jaggery's address. I emailed him, and it's not very romantic as a thing, just like that. And then we met up, and he was very, very open towards it, like, he's like, yeah, let me show you the house I grew up in, and like all these things, And then obviously we wanted to see the mine, and getting to the mine was, it took a while, because it's like a 6-hour drive. We did it in a pickup truck. Like, I was hanging out in the back with Tim, the director of photography, driving all the way in these like first it was like a paved road, then it was a dirt road, then it was just like a path, like like a really small path. We got there in the middle of nowhere. And yeah, we could hear bells around. They're like, oh yeah, we have to ring these bells because elephants might come and crawl all over us. So it's like,
wow,
completely out there. And yeah, he showed us, all his work, showed us how it works in the mine, what he mines, and it's not a big operation. As you see in the film, it's just kind of like a plot of land with a hole in the ground, guys with pickaxes and shovels and trying to find the streak.
So there was like a couple of things. So the scenes of him when he's like right down there in the hole, and he's got the gemstone in his hand, and he's just checking it and chucking it up to his mate and stuff. Like, he's just as calm and just as sort of mellow and chill as he is in any other circumstance, in any other situation that you find him. He's like, he has that wave of like, the ups and the downs are all fairly mitigated. Like, he comes across such a cool dude as a result of that.
Exactly, he's just a cool guy, He just like keeps it cool all the time.
But like, it got me thinking, like, like I guess there's an element of like when you watch it and you see him there, and then you've obviously established who he is, and you see the newspaper cuttings, and you see the footage of Witch in the '70s, and he's got the huge hat, and like the crowds are massive, and then you see him there, and obviously he's older, and his head shaved and whatnot, but he's just doing this thing, and he's like, oh, it's my life, God says this is what I got to do, this is what I got to do, and it got me thinking, like, what would be the Western equivalent of that? And I was like, Bruce Springsteen working on like a cattle ranch, or like Mick Jagger working in a charity shop up north somewhere in the UK. Like, is this like if you took somebody from the Western music scene, you took one of those megastars and you put them into that kind of environment, you're like, wow, like that's the comparable. That is what the comparable would be for people in this country. It really is such an incredible contrast.
Yeah, it definitely is. Because he was like the biggest star of the country, like no questions asked. He was the guy. And then he kind of, like I guess like the way the country went after the 70s when Zamrock and Witch were big, kind of went downhill economically as well. So like they weren't doing many live shows, and people had to sort of choose between buying a record and buying food. So obviously they bought food. So it became like a very much a luxury, to do music. And that's the same thing that happened to Jaggery himself, because like it's not like like he was a huge star, but it's not like he was making a lot of money, so like when that hit, it hit him as well, it hit the rest of the band as well, so they kind of had to sort of go the same direction as everybody else and like find other ways in which to sort of stay afloat.
But incredibly humble about that ride, and incredibly modest about that journey. Like there's no sense of feeling hard done by about like those circumstances stealing their fame and their.
He definitely takes it all with like a lot of philosophy, and like he's all like, well, if one door closes, another one will open. That's what he always says, and like he's kind of led me to believe that as well. It's a good way of thinking. It's like if something sucks right now, something better is gonna come afterwards. And he firmly believes that, and I guess it has happened to him. Like.
Yeah. I mean, he's ridden that. He's ridden like changes that most people are never going to witness in their lifetime in terms of seismic social and economic change that affects your entire outlook, your entire projected path of where you think you're going. I made a note. Who's the American dude who mentioned he mentioned this incredible thing of like, they were still putting out records during the famine in the 80s in the disco era, and like they had this incredible drive to just keep doing what they were doing, even though people were starving and that there was just war on every front. And it's like when you consider they kept it alive, and whilst it was morphing into something slightly different with the disco thing, and obviously Jaggery had disappeared by for this moment, but like I can't remember who that guy was. Who was the guy who said?
He's Egon. He's the founder of Now Again Records, and he's the guy that first reissued Witch. He was one of the founders of Stone's Throw with Madlib and Peanut Butter Wolf, and then sort of went separate ways. And Now Again is a subsidiary, if I'm not mistaken, of Stone's Throw. And yeah, he's the one that like got Zamrock heard, basically. Like what happened was that there was this other label, German label called Shadows, that were reissuing stuff, but they were kind of bootlegs. And so he found out about this, contacted Jaggery, is like, hey, these guys are doing this, do you know? And he didn't know, so he's like, well, let me take care of this and do a proper reissue, and that's how it went. And going back to what you were saying before, it's definitely true that like a lot of these guys were like, well, this is what we do, and we're gonna keep on doing it, like whether you like it or not whether you like it or not, but like whether it's we can survive off of it or not, we're gonna keep on going, and keep the flame burning. And they did, changing styles and just keeping on, I guess. I don't know.
But it really epitomizes the sense, which is like one of the big things that I took away from the film, which is that like whilst you need food to eat, like a part of you needs creativity and music and art, and like that's just as important to living as the physical parts of living. And like the fact that they just carried on doing it, and we take it for granted that a lot of the music in the Western Hemisphere throughout the 70s and stuff, and later, is preserved so perfectly, and that music is just so perfectly recorded and archived and stored away. And when you're seeing those great scenes of like you guys going around like that old record room and looking for the newsreels, and then when he shows you the machine that they press it on, like they clung on to all of that through such adversity, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, like definitely archives are not quite what they are around us, like there it's like that place, that studio where you see all the records, that's probably the most complete archive of Zamrock, of Zambian music in general in the world, because that was the main studio where most of it was recorded. And the guy that owns it at the moment, like he's very adamant about the fact that like no record ever leaves that room for any reason whatsoever. And that's thanks to that. That's why you got that.
You could kind of pick up on that energy a little bit. Like I noticed there's a moment where he goes to pull out, I think it's like the Lazy Bones, or it's like one of the earlier albums, and he leaves his hand in, and he's like, here it is, and it's like, I'm not going to leave here, so I know exactly where it goes back in.
Yeah, he's totally like that, and thank God for him, because like all those records are so difficult to come by. Like I've gotten some in Zambia when I was there, but most of them like are super scratched, super dirty. Like to find some in decent condition is really difficult. Because like I was told that apparently when cassettes came in, people that had records, like they would give them to their kids to play as frisbees, So they would just like throw these records around. So most of it is gone, And in fact, what Jaggery told me is that the Lazy Bone masters, like he managed to find them, send them to Egon, and who then recorded them. And just as he recorded them, they would just like wither away. So like they managed to record it at one time and then gone.
Oh my God! Wow, like that's nuts. Yeah. So like of the percentage of stuff that they've actually got a record of, so there must be tons which is just lost to the wind.
Yeah, I mean, and also like Zamrock was such a huge scene. Like everybody had bands, and like there's a lot of recorded stuff, but there's a lot of bands that never recorded anything that drew crowds anyways, because like as the weekend came, like every single establishment in the country had a band playing, this kind of like this weird Zamrock, which was heavy, as you've heard, it's like something that's very peculiar because it's not really there in any other African country. It's like nobody else in any other African country was like obsessed with like Black Sabbath and like Deep Purple and like wanted to have Big Fuzz, so that's really particular, and I think that's what drew me the most, because it's almost this like sort of punk drive to it, and recording it as well.
There's that great moment, I think you articulate it, where it's talking about the cycle of music and that sort of transatlantic cycle of music, which is fantastic. Like, and it really makes you think, like the cyclical nature of influence. And slaves went from West Africa to the plantations, and they created blues music, and blues music was then moved to Motown, moved to Detroit, and then got copied by the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and then it became rock and roll, and then it's ended up back there. Like,
so it's like this full circle with all, like it gets back there, but like once it comes back, it's taking up all these things around the circle, and that's what really makes it interesting, like some of the stuff from Witch, like you almost can't really tell it's African, but then when you listen to it a little bit closer, like the drummer is just so much groovier than any other drummer.
He makes that great Jaggery says that great thing about like you guys have like your nuances and you have these melody things that you get really interested in, but it's all about rhythm for us. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's. But why do you think Zambia became the rock and roll, hub of Africa? Why?
I really don't know. Like I think, well, like they got their independence in '64, and after that, like it was like a bit of a youth liberation there as well. They had really nothing to fight against anymore, and they saw all these records come in because it was a British colony, right? So like all of the stuff came in from the UK, a lot of like American stuff as well. Like they got the BBC radio and all of that, so they heard what was happening there and they kind of loved it. But like to be honest with you, like I don't know why they went more for that than, I don't know, say something different. I mean, like in places like Nigeria, it's more towards funk, right? And like in Zambia, it's more towards like hard rock. And the exact reason, I have no clue, but thank God for it.
Sometimes these things just come out of the soil, like they're just meant to be because the vibe ran through that place, like, and that's it. Like, it's okay. So I got another one for you. Now, like, I can't remember the exact date, so you'll probably know better than me. But like, so you started. So 2012 was like the genesis of when you started building the relationship with Jaggery, and you started to film. You were filming bits since then when you started to go back. When did Searching for Sugar Man come out? And like, did that say to you, oh, do you know what? Like, this is something that we should probably think about. I'm not sure if it was or it wasn't, but did that kind of say to you, this could be a feature thing, and we could go down that route, and this is a possibility?
So actually, 2012 was when I first heard The Witch. I started doing the film in 2014, so a couple of years later. Searching for Sugar Man came out in 2012, and funny enough, I was living in London at the time, and I remember a friend of mine was like, do you know this thing called Secret Cinema they have in London?
Yeah. I've done it a couple of times.
A South African friend of mine was like, oh, let's go to this Secret Cinema. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. And I was like, okay, let's go. Like, we get to the cinema, it's all got like South African and American flags, record stores. I was like, all right, I think I am going to like this. Then we see the film, and I was like, obviously blown away. Then what was cool about it is that at the end of it, like the director came out on stage, is like, thank you so much for coming to see the film. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rodriguez on stage. So he played right after that.
Oh my God. Oh, he was there. He was there.
So I was like, man, that's the coolest thing ever. Like, I wish I could do the same thing, and that obviously, then when I started doing this, I was like, well, like, I want to get to that moment, and we actually did do that only once so far in Moscow, out of all places, where we played for a Red Bull Music Festival. We showed the film, and as the credits were rolling, the band got on stage, and then we played a gig.
Oh, that's wicked. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an influence for sure. I mean, there's lots of things that are quite different because clearly Rodriguez is an American that was famous in South Africa, whilst Jaggery is somebody that was only famous in Zambia back then. And to be honest, right now, he's probably more famous outside of Zambia than in Zambia. Because like when I was in Zambia, like a lot of like people our age, they'd be like, what are you doing here? I was like, well, doing this thing on Witch. They're like, Witch? What do you mean, like witchcraft? I was like, no, like the.
Oh wow! It really has no legacy with the younger generation.
Hardly anyone knows about it. It's like, and so like I'm actually hoping more than anything that this film, when it's shown in Zambia properly, can maybe spark something new coming from Zambia, a new wave of Zamrock or something like that.
That's so hard to. It's so hard to relate to that. It would be like our generation. In Europe being like, oh yeah, do you remember them Beatles? Oh yeah, something our parents like, or like that's so hard to understand.
Yeah, it's quite crazy because like they were like, a lot of people were like, okay, I'm a Zambian in Zambia and I've got an Italian telling me about a Zambian scene that I have no idea about. We're baffled, but yeah, I mean, it's crazy, and it's also something that, considering like the change of means of listening to music, the fact that a lot of it was difficult to find digitally, that's a few years ago. I mean, now obviously everybody has the internet in Zambia as well, so it's very easy to find. But, as they did back then, even now, like everybody's kind of looking out more for inspiration outside of Zambia than in Zambia, right? So like now there's like the main scene in Zambia is kind of like hip hop, Afrobeats, sorry, like this like kind of weird like African reggaeton almost thing, and they're always looking for like hip hop artists from outside of Zambia or stuff like that. Just like maybe The Witch did back in the day, listening to the Stones or Black Sabbath or whatever. So that's interesting. It's just like that's what they see as. I mean, young Zambians, most of them, that's what they want to do. But there is a small pocket of people that listen to like rock and roll, and like they mainly play like metal, as it happens in a lot of African countries. Actually, you've got like all these guys playing hip hop, and then you've got like these kids like playing like, not really black metal, but like hard, like to contrast that. And I think that's super cool, because like you're rebelling like against like the mainstream, obviously, and like they're doing that thing. So hopefully there will be a resurgence in this in sort of music played by actual instruments, because like most
Well,
of
I guess we're experiencing I guess we're experiencing a similar trend in the West, in that like there is a rising youth movement which is driven largely by grime and rap and hip hop, and like rock and roll is kind of is been slightly sidelined. I wouldn't say it's dead. I stand by Neil Young. It'll never die. But right now it's having a hibernation. Like it's having a moment. And maybe one day it'll just explode again, and it will be the thing that influences young people in Africa and all over.
I think there is like there's always cycles and things, and like I'm sure. I mean, there is definitely an underground rock scene. I mean, there's obviously acts that started as rock and roll and then became something else, like for instance like Tame Impala, like when they started it was like this really cool psychedelic. Now I don't know what the hell it is, but like it's like there's definitely some things that still I still have hope. And also like now with the fact that like everybody's connected and can find out any kind of music possible, a lot of people that are sort of digital natives and get into this music like have such broad sort of knowledge of music. But then when they start making music, they're like, well, I'll take this sort of like no wave bass line, and then I'll take this thing and like mix it into something completely new. And that's all that can happen really, because in a way, like you had such a diverse kind of music with rock because of the invention of the electric guitar and like all the different effects and pedals that you could have with it. But then it's kind of all being played out, and like all that's being done now is like kind of copying something of the past. So it's like, it's difficult for it to still sound fresh, but people definitely do manage.
Yeah, it will evolve. It will evolve, and the next wave, the next movement of it will appear and be bold and big again. And I definitely, Gio, I don't know what you think, but like right now, I feel like we were watching we got a film company here in Bournemouth, and we were, after work one day, we put on some music on YouTube, and we started watching some old videos of Glastonbury festivals, because obviously nothing's happened for the last 12 months. And we started watching some of this old Glastonbury stuff, and we were like, oh my God, like, can you think about what the energy is going to be like when all of this COVID is out the way? Like, there is going to be such a hankering for live music, and maybe a lot of those genres that we consider to have sort of like passed away will just come flooding back, because that's where all the energy will come from.
I agree. I mean, I think that what I'm hoping is that every musician right now is like working hard onto making something, to be able to present something new when this is all over and we can all go out, dance again and listen to music.
Because I don't want to hate on like grime and rap and stuff, because like some of it's great, but like that stuff is built for the small device. That stuff's built for headphones. Like it's designed for headphones. It's not meant to be played in front of 20,000-30,000 people.
Of course.
And that's what I think people are going to want. They're going to want that noise when we come out of all of this. So I have fingers crossed that Jaggery is going to be doing another tour, and he's going to be headlining Glasgow and doing 180,000 people.
Well, that would be the dream. Hopefully, you never know. I guess we have to wait a little bit longer, but definitely as soon as things are open again, we're going to be touring again. So.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm glad to hear it. Just going back to Sugar Man, yeah, like they're two very different films. Like they're very different stories, and and yeah, there's a massive cultural difference between the two. But I did pick up on like the vibes of like the way that transcendental way that the music comes in and out of the narrative. Like I could see that sort of comparison, and I think it must have helped having Sugar Man there, having been done, so that you knew. People are going to love this when it comes. People are going to love it.
By the way, yes. And I mean, that time that I told you that I saw it, that's the only time I ever saw the film. I never saw it again, because I was like, that's great. But like, I mean, when I started working on Witch, I vowed to myself to not watch any music documentary, because I didn't want to get influenced at all, which in a way is great, but in another way, like you could see what works and what doesn't. But I just like completely blocked it off, and I just worked on it. And yes, definitely, the fact that something like that had been done with Sugar Man, and I mean, it won the Oscar, right, for the best documentary. So like, it's definitely on the map, and like doing something like this in a way doesn't sound as crazy as it might have before, you know. And there's, again, because of the hyper connectivity where everybody knows a lot of stuff, a lot of people have stumbled onto Witch. A lot of people are interested about it, you know. So I will get messages on our Instagram or on our Facebook all the time that are like, oh my God, amazing music, you know, like when is the film out, blah, blah, blah. So now finally will be out soon, so we'll be able to see it. And yeah, but like one of the comparisons that I love the most that people say about the film is that it's sort of like a cross between Searching for Sugar Man and Buena Vista Social Club in a way, you know. So I was like, well, okay, you know, I got some two pretty big comparisons.
Those are some big hitters. In terms of musical documentaries, you're probably not getting any higher than those. It has that. It has that. If I was going to compare it to Buena Vista, it would be in the sense that it's not overly dramatized, and that you kind of just play with the neutral nature of the story as it unfolded to you. And the story is just like Jaggery telling us about how it went down, you guys exploring what the scene was like, and then just going on that natural journey to bring it in front of a European audience. And you don't, you know, unlike Sugar Man, which is contrived slightly to kind of really give us that question mark and that sense of like, is he going to be around? Like, you just kind of were like, no, I'm going to play it the way it was, and I'm going to let the music do the talking.
Pretty much, you know, and also like, it was a journey for all of us, you know, like to discover more. And like, you know, clearly I wanted to like tell the viewer like what the scene was like, what the country was like and everything. But then I also really enjoyed the observational part where you can see like it unfolding in front of you, you know, all these moments where they start practicing together before the first show in Europe and all of that, you know, and like you can really feel how people are like, well, is this happening? Like what's going on, you know? And so like, I think that, you know, like initially I felt like, okay, is it weird that like we're doing the film, but we're also organizing the tour? And I was like, well, maybe, but at the same time, like, I'm telling you that like, this is how it's happening. We got the chance to do it, so let's do it. You know, like you as a viewer are not gonna be like, that feels like you're making it up. No, it's just like being completely transparent and honest, be like, this is how it went.
You're being an active participant in the story, in the events. Like you're not a wholly neutral observer. But then most documentary filmmakers are actively bringing people together and taking people to places and stuff. So I don't think you should have any issues with that. Like that's documentary filmmaking. So I was gonna press you on a couple. One of the things that struck me is now, and I don't want to come across like patronizing, but this could easily be interpreted as such. But like, the quality of the music is so ridiculously good. Like the quality of the recordings, and even when I went straight after watching the movie and went on Spotify and got up like the Lazy Bones album and the two early Witch albums, the quality is ridiculous. Like, I haven't even heard it on vinyl, but like, were you struck? I mean, obviously you'd heard it before you met him, so you knew it was incredible quality, but was that part of the thing which was like, this has been recorded like in Lusaka? Like, really? Like,
yeah, I mean, it struck me, but like, it kind of like, it's definitely recorded well, but it's also like quite lo-fi in parts, you know? And like when they told us how they recorded it, especially Lazy Bones, if you listen to Lazy Bones carefully, there's always like a hum at the background, and that's because they recorded it to a one track, and like they would record first the bass, then the guitar,
and just layered it all on top of itself,
all on one track, you know. And still they managed to make it sound good because they were like, you know, they were great musicians themselves, because like they were really they were like, okay, so we don't have a normal job, we're musicians, but we're gonna take it seriously because that's what we're doing. So at one point they all lived together in one house, and they had rules, which were no girlfriends allowed in the rehearsal room, not to get like a Yoko situation, or like if anybody like screws up a point, like they want to be embarrassed in front of their girlfriend. So like they said no girlfriends. They said that in the mornings they would practice covers. So from 9 in the morning until like lunchtime, covers. In the afternoon they would have their own compositions. like work on new stuff. And if somebody didn't get their part right, they weren't allowed to go out at night. They'd have to stay at home and practice until they got it right. And that's how like they lived like that, you know. And so doing that, they were super tight. And by the time they got, and playing every weekend, obviously, and when they played in the weekends, it's not like you go out and there's a gig and then there's a DJ. Like if you went to see Wish, that was it. They would start playing like at 8 p.m. and finish at 4 a.m. Like 4 or 5 sets, you know, of the same songs or whatever, or jams. And so they were incredibly tight. And by the time they got to the studio, like they would do like 1 or 2 takes and it was done. You know? So
it's nuts. It's nuts. Like and the you know the and then when you see the pressing machine, like you're just like, he did everything on that. Like
it's crazy.
It blows your brains. I guess I'll ask, like on that, it might not be related to that, but like over the course of the journey and exploring the making of the music, or it might be related to the touring, what was the one thing that surprised you the most about the journey, or the one thing that surprised you the most when you started deep diving into the scene?
And do you mean like what surprised me about what happened back in the day, or what was
either? It could be either, or it could be both. Like just the over the course of the whole journey of like, you know, 8 or 9 years, like or 6 or between 2014 and now. Like, what was there one moment that you were like, wow, like that really knocked you off, that you just, you know, it was stranger than fiction?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, maybe it's not like one particular instance, but like Jaggery's drive, like that, you know, never ceases to amaze me. Like I knew that like he's on it, but like in the first tour, right, in Europe, we played, I think 7 gigs in 6 days, because like we had a boiler room in London, so we played 2 gigs in 1 day. He was not particularly used to singing every day, and he was giving 110% every night. So like he kept saying like his throat hurts and stuff like that. By the time he admitted that he had like actual plaques in his throat, like it was really like, he's like, every time I drink water, it's like daggers in my throat. Yet he just went for it, went crazy, and like gave it all out. And I was like, whoa, man. You know, like, wow, you know, like, and he made it and he sounded good, you know? So like, to have that drive, to have somebody that like, I never felt that I was pushing him, you know, but more that like, he was like, okay, man, let's do it. I don't care. Let's go. I was like, okay, you know, like I gotta respect that and make the most of it for him, you know, to make it so worthwhile. And I hope that I somehow did, you know? And that's really the thing that, to me, I was like, before the tour, I was like, fuck it, you know, I wonder like if we're gonna make it, you know, like if he's gonna manage, blah blah. And yeah, he did manage, you know, yeah, for sure.
Did you have, I mean, like a guy with that much energy and also that much positivity, and sometimes like in those low moments, or when you're struggling, or when you've got like financial problems or something, you can be a bit like, oh, look, dude, like just give us a moment. Like, did you ever have any moments with him where you're just like, oh, Jaggery, like it's too much right now, like you're pissing me off?
No, never actually, because like he's always so chill that he's like, he understands everything right away, like, you know, like we're great friends by now, you know, so like we communicate super easily, and like, you know, he's very positive, and like if he sees that something is not working out, he tries to help out to see a way that we can find a solution, you know? So it's, I don't think I ever had too much of Jaggery. Really, he never got on my nerves or anything like that.
Well, incredible friendship when you find someone that you can just spend that time around, and you know that regardless of the situation that you find yourself in, you're not gonna get on each other's nerves.
Yeah, it's, I mean, it was particularly stressful. I mean, at the end of that first tour, when we finished in Liverpool, having like really traveled, I mean, that was the first time I really toured with a band. I mean, some of the guys were used to it, but like I was completely dead by the end of it, because like, you know, the late nights, the early mornings, I was usually driving the van, and I was completely destroyed by the end of it. And yeah, Jaggery was still on it. It was like, okay, man, that was really cool. When is the next tour? Like, all right. Yeah.
Was it just on that, like the practicalities of making the film and also running the tour at the same time? Because it says at the end of the film that you subsequently became, and you know, you were during it, his manager effectively. Yeah. But like, yeah, like, was it difficult to finance the whole operation? Like, did you ever have any problems like financing the film or financing the tour or financing both, or then financing the finishing of the film? Or
Yeah, well, that's why it took so long, because of finding the financing, like we're very lucky to have a private investor who put like the seed money to make a start. But then it was through crowdfunding. Whenever I made any bit of money doing other things, I would put it in there. Whenever we made any money, it was always going into the film. Also my director of photography, a lot of people were so passionate about the project that I ended up working for free. So like it was really difficult, and especially, like at one point we're like, okay, so we're out of money. What do we do? And like somehow we always managed through friends or somebody was willing to like help us a little bit, and that kept us going. And yeah, but it wasn't easy, and I think that was the most worrisome or like most intense part of the film, because obviously as well for the tour, like I wanted to make sure that everybody actually earned some money, not working for free, like, and clearly some of the money from the film went to pay the tour. Like it was all one thing, one hand helping the other. And it took a while, but like we somehow managed, luckily. Now hopefully we'll see some of this money come back in at some point.
well, I've got so much respect for you, like being out there and just accelerating that forwards whilst the coffers are slowly deteriorating, and you're like, are we going to get from one place to the next? And like,
I mean, because like I had one point, I think after 1 year that I started the project, that I was like, okay, I got no more money in my bank account. Like I've spent a year on this. Like I'm just gonna go for it, as much as I can. Like, whatever I can find, whatever I do, like I'm not gonna make that year that I've spent on this, or these hopes that I've given myself, Jagger, anybody, worthless. So like I really was like, okay, I changed my mindset and I just went for it. And as soon as I did, all these small things started happening, and they still do, I guess. And
were you working on anything in particular, or whilst that you were making the film?
Well, I was doing like odd things here and there, like that was definitely my main focus that I had, but like I was, shooting a few videos here and there, nothing worth really mentioning, but like, I knew that this was my main project, my complete passion project, and whatever I did on the side was in order to fund this or make this happen, basically.
Amazing. Like, it's that fire, that commitment that drives, independent filmmaking. And, if it wasn't for that gold stuff that you got inside of you, Gio, we don't get these beautiful films. We don't get to experience Zamrock and parts of the world and cultures that we would never otherwise come into contact with. So, thanks for keeping the fire alive, dude.
Well, I mean, I plan to keep on doing this somehow,
So like, I'm gonna round up because I don't want to keep you too much longer. But like, what's next? Like, so obviously at the end of the film, it says that you're still managing Jagger, you're still managing Witch, and obviously COVID is causing chaos right now. But like, you kind of alluded to some of the plans for the band and some of the plans for him. But like, as a filmmaker as well, like, what's the plan? Have you got anything? Where are we going?
Yeah. Okay. So with Witch, where we're going is that hopefully by the end of the year we'll manage to record a new album and get that to come out. Obviously, there's a lot of hurdles in the way, COVID being main one of them, funds being another one of them. But there's a few people interested, so I'll keep you posted and seeing where that happens. Obviously, when that happens, tours and all of that. We've got a US tour that's tentatively scheduled for about a year from now in the US, Europe as well. I mean, it's very difficult to plan. In terms of like my journey, like, well, when we do this new record, I'm obviously going to be shooting that and like making a little bit of a follow-up. But in terms of my filmmaking, I'm not sure I would do another documentary for the simple reason that I would end up somewhere, say like Indonesia, find like a psychedelic dude from the 70s, like do the same exact thing, which would kind of be repeating myself, like unless maybe a publication or somebody is like, hey, here's some money, give us like 4 20-minute episodes on these guys, then I would gladly do it. So now I'm starting to write a first feature film, which will obviously be very much influenced by music, and will have a lot of content with music, but it will be fiction. It'll be a kind of like surreal, weird thing. I'm still in the process of writing, so I can't really give you too much info.
I won't ask you too many questions about it, but I will ask what continent it's set on.
Well, it's not really. It's kind of like a timeless and placeless thing. It's like kind of like a fantasy world. I'm really into like surrealism and stuff like that. So it will have actual musicians in it, hopefully played by these musicians. So I have to make sure I got a really good script.
I'm getting Jim Jarmusch vibes here, like
that's what people have been saying. So
I'm excited. Cool. Well, look, Gio, this has been wicked. Trying to keep it short and sweet, because obviously we're living our entire lives through our laptops these days. So like, we don't want our eyeballs to go completely square. But look, dude, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. We're so thrilled to have the movie. I'm delighted that like our audience is going to get to see the movie, even though they're not going to get the full experience. For the moment, they're at least going to get to see it and hear it, and come into contact with this wonderful, crazy, havoc-causing band, and yeah, look, hopefully at some point in the future, when things change, maybe we'll see you guys in the UK, and we might get the man himself down to do something for us here.
That would be amazing, and I really hope that does happen. And it will happen. As Jagger always says, like, yeah, man, it's gonna happen. Just give it a little bit of time. So yeah, but thank you so much for having us, and I'm so happy that we'll be able to get into a lot of people's homes, I guess, or laptops, for them to see the film, and waiting for them to see the real thing live. It's really, as I said, also been a pleasure to chat together today, because I think we went through a lot of interesting things for a lot of people.
Sure. No, definitely. Our audience, is built of filmmakers, musicians, composers, and sound designers. So, like, this is going to be a real treat for them. Like, I just know it. So yeah, it's perfect. Gio, look, thank you so much. I wish you the best of luck getting through the next 6 months of this horrible COVID landscape. But keep the fire alive, dude. And let's keep in touch, and let's chat soon.
All right. Thanks so much.
Nice one, dude. Catch you later.
See you. Bye-bye.